Okay, our next speaker is here because of a drunken bet. In 2006, he and a group of, I'm assuming, drunken friends decided that they were going to enter a half marathon, even though none of them did any running. And that decision, he's told me, changed his life, taking up running and doing something different with his life. It was a trip to Malawi in 2008, however, that inspired him to sell his stuff, give up his job and become a teacher for special educational needs, and devote the rest of his time to fundraising that can change children's lives. It also inspired him to run the length of Malawi. I don't really know how that happens, but that's what happened to our next speaker, Brendan Rendall. Please give him a round of applause. Thanks. Have fun.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So here I am in 2009, and this was my second visit to Malawi. This photograph was taken at FOMO, Friends of Malawi Orphans, a project in South Malawi that looks after 4,000 orphans. I have a slightly dodgy hair colour there. I was in retail management at the time. I'd graduated in fashion, and I'd never witnessed this level of poverty before. And it was this 3-week trip that would go on and inspire and change and shaped the last 8 years. So in 2016, I decided to go back to the country that I love, and what better way to do it than by foot. And I decided the goal was to raise 35,000 to build a science and art block for FOMO Secondary School, and it was my thank you to those children that first inspired me. So Malawi's situated in the southeast of Africa. It's a landlocked country surrounded by Tanzania, Mozambique and Zambia, and it has a 360-mile lake all the way through the central. Population's 18 million, average income's $350 a year, and life expectancy is 60. In the rural areas this is a lot lower, and in the south it's actually estimated it's about 37. So I was fortunate to have a team. On the far right is Emma Timmis. And she was on the bike and she cycled along with me and gave me water and chews. And I often have my music on and she used to moan, "Brendan, you're just ignoring me," but I wasn't really. Mary that's in front of me and Keith on the far left, they're the founders of the project. And these are the orphans from FOMO, and they would go ahead and set up camp and prepare the food. So this is me relaxing after day one, marathon one. It was from these early stages, really, that I knew how important this run was. So here's a school building. They were actually sitting, taking exams in this school building when we arrived, and I realised that witnessing that kind of extreme poverty was the drive to make me succeed in this run. So the day itself, I'd be up at 4:30. I'd start running at 5:30 before it got too hot. I'd run between 13 and 15 miles and then have a break. And then I would run another 6 miles to 20 miles and then finish the marathon, usually around 10:30, 11. And in the afternoon, we could spend time with the children. So within the first few miles, children joined me as they went to school. A lot of them would travel 5 kilometres. And the landscape in the north was just beautiful, with sweeping mountains. Sometimes it got a little bit out of hand. And I was kind of a bit worried about tripping. Luckily, I didn't. And in the distance, you can actually see my head coming through. And they would be shouting, "Unzungu, Unzungu," which means a white man, a white man. So that was quite interesting. The run took me through incredible communities. A lot of rural Malawi, they still have the mud huts and the straw roofing. What fascinated me all the way through was the toys. You know, there was no iPads or iPods in sight. It was just all recycled rubbish. And these children used this white carton's actually an alcohol carton. Other children would have wheels and they would push along with a stick. But they kind of had a happiness that we will kind of never understand. You're probably thinking, what is this? So the second week, I'm into my stride, and I'm feeling relaxed, and the days are ticking off, and then I run into this swarm of flies, and it stinks. And I pull my buff up, my sunglasses on, my sun visor down, and I'm sort of doing all of this, and Emma's next to me on the bike trying to cover her face. And then there's these women, and they're doing this with the baskets. And I'm thinking, what's that? So anyway, that evening, this was produced, and it's in fact a fly burger. The women were catching flies and mashing them into burgers. I didn't try one because I was like, I don't want to get sick at this stage. But maybe I would now, I don't know. Along the side of the roads would be mice on sticks, and this kind of reflected the level of poverty, really. I mean, there's no nutritional value in that. And also, those children really should have been at school. And then my first obstacle, a baboon. I mean, I always remember baboons when I was a child at Longleat Safari Park, on the car in front of me, ripping the car to pieces. So I kind of thought, is it going to jump on me and then rip my head off? So my team came off the truck and they kind of surrounded me, and then there was no baboons, and I was like, I'm being a bit pathetic here. They didn't cause any problems. When I did join the road, there was no cars in sight, and we often had like little races. These two mules were pulling along this trailer with children, and they would overtake me and I'd overtake them, and there were just lots of smiles and lots of laughter. On reflection, why was I wearing red? I didn't realize I was going to run through so many bulls. But they didn't cause me any issues either. So day 15 and kind of disaster did strike. I'd ran for 14 days, 14 marathons, and it was typical. This was the day that the UK High Commissioner, Michael Nevin, was going to come out and run 5 kilometres with me. I'd been up since 10 o'clock with diarrhea and sickness. I didn't make it to any toilet. It was just outside the tent. And in the morning, I slept to about 1 o'clock that afternoon, and I don't know why, but I flicked this switch. All the hard work that I'd done, I was like, I've got to do it. I've got to drive on. And I ended up managing to run 14 miles that day, and it was all a bit of a blur. This was my shower after each marathon, so it was quite basic. Anyone that's run a marathon probably knows it's a warm shower is quite nice. Again, when you've been running a marathon back-to-back, your legs are hurting, and squat toilets aren't always the best. And this, in fact, is one of the most luxury ones. And then 3 days before the end, for me, this was like one of the most important days. Gianni, who's 12 here, who's disabled, both his parents had died, and he couldn't go to school anymore because he was too heavy to be carried. And this, for me, put so much into perspective that the showers, the aches, the pains were all really insignificant. They were trivial. They were just temporary. And it was just, I just couldn't get my head around it. But fortunate for me, 3 days after the run, FOMO, we had a wheelchair, and we went back and gave him some school clothes, and now he's going back to school. Other highlights are we raised the 35,000, we built the science block, so the children are now using the facilities. And the team and the people of Malawi are just absolutely incredible. It's really hard to share pictures of actually how crazy running Malawi was. I mean, it was just hundreds of people every day joining me. So I'm going to share a video of the final day and down to the Mozambique border. Oh, no, I'm not. Behind the poverty, Malawi's not just has the most incredible people, but the landscape and the country is just beautiful. Lake Malawi is more like a tropical beach. Then you've got Mount Malanje in the south. I was fortunate to hike up this and just stare out at the African plain, and it was absolutely beautiful. And then Majetti, it's a real success story. Up to recent years, they had no wildlife, and now it's been reintroduced, and they now have the big 5. So going back to where I've just made a mess, I have a video of the final day and down to the Mozambique border.
It's Maestro on the beat, baby.
Let me know, sweet banana, well, SideTech.com.
Ningofuna uziwedulila Bajandi nafutika kufusila Moyo wanga uzila mulila Baby, whatever you want, I'll do it for you. My baby, whatever you want, I'll do it for you. You're my sunshine, you're my moon lover. Down look and sit kutela feo. Let me know, sweet banana, well, let me know. Let me know, sweet banana, well, let me know. Ndima kwanita kwanita. Ndima kwanita kwanita. Let me know, sweet banana, well, let me know. Let me know, sweet banana, well, let me know. Ndima kwanita kwanita. Ndima kwanita kwanita. Baby, fine face, I love you, my mommy. I know say you get high taste, yo, so make you no worry. My name is Casey, yo. Casey, as I talk, that's what I do.
So all I'd like to finally say is that if anyone in the audience is sat with that one thing in the back of their mind, you know, whether it's the south, you know, walk the Southwestern Path or Hadrian's Wall or do something, an adventure doesn't have to be abroad; it can be anywhere. But just move out of your comfort zone, move it to the front of your head. In 2008, I never knew this trip would transform my life, so I would go out and do it. Thank you.